Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the schools group event today. Unfortunately, we are experiencing some technical difficulties at the moment, so the group chair, Lynn, is not able to get on to the main part of the meeting at the moment. So what we will do as the most important part of the event today is Claire's presentation, and we have half an hour to sell the Schools Toolkit to you. We are going to make a start to the meeting. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Barber. I chair IRMS Public Sector, and I looked after the schools group last year, just briefly until a new chair was appointed. And the new schools group chair is Lynn Rouse, who we will try to get somewhere so that you can see her as the course of the event goes on. So, but without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Claire Archibald, who is going to take us through the next 30 minutes or so. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody can hear me and can see the slides okay. Yeah, Lynn, hello. I know you're there somewhere. So I have met Lynn, been working with Lynn for the last couple of months. So we're really lucky to have a new chair of the schools group, and tremendously grateful to have Lynn to lead us. But as I say, still supporting. And if you've joined me for my previous 3 webinars over the last 3 years, you hopefully know me a little bit. My name is Claire Archibald. I'm the Senior Data Protection Officer and Service Manager at a service called the Education Data Hub. We're based within Derbyshire County Council, and we provide lots of data protection support and advice to schools, and we act as a data protection officer as a service for about 400 schools now. And prior to doing this job, I did work in a school as well, so I do know how schools work. So we've talked quite a lot about records management over the previous year, and the first webinar that I delivered to you was actually about records retention. And so I'm not going to go over that ground again, but if you haven't been with me for that very first webinar, it is on the IRMS YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, look up for the IRMS channel, and you will see there my presentation on records retention in a digital age schools. And this is building on that. So what did we talk about last time? So we talked about the retention of pupil records and other personal data, and retention of records in general, and we looked at some of that relevant law and guidance. I spent some time talking about the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, the ICSA or the J inquiry, and the implications that had then for schools in terms of managing staff and pupil records. And then talk to you about how basically schools were in a bit of a hybrid situation, and you are in the situation where you have to manage both paper and digital records, and that was presenting some challenges. I talked last time about the importance of digital continuity, so that's making sure that you can continue to access your digital records over time. Software expires, platforms, sort of shelved, and actually how can you access that data if you need to keep it for a really long time? It's a bit easier when you had paper. You could have paper that was hundreds of years old and it's just as readable, but when it comes to digital platforms, that's a bit more difficult. And then really I started to introduce to you the fact that you should all start to be thinking about having an effective retention policy for this new age and planning for how you work as a digital school. So this is what we're going to build on today. And so it's going to put the new toolkit in this context. So just a little bit of a reminder, this is a slide that I used last time, and it's a reminder of where we're at in schools. So in 2016, I was working in a school kind of over this side of the screen. I was working in a school and I was beginning to wonder whether we might be able to be allowed to go paperless. And I remember looking at this guidance from the Department for Education and how they were saying, oh, it's a good idea to move your school to the cloud. The cloud seemed marvellous and mysterious, but we were moving at a reasonable pace, and we were moving gradually to digital platforms. So things like those teacher mark books were becoming online trackers and so on and so forth. And schools were kind of moving at a comfortable pace. And it's a bit like my analogy here is how we've gone from petrol cars, and we're kind of moving towards the electric cars, and we're kind of in this hybrid situation where we felt comfortable. Then what happened? The COVID pandemic came, and it put schools' plans for digitisation into overdrive. And actually what that's meant for schools is that sometimes you might have acted before you've adapted your records management practices. By example, is related to safeguarding records. So as I say, when I was in school, safeguarding records were generally held in paper files that were locked away in the head teacher's office. And when a child left our school to go to a new school, we would carefully take that file out of the school and we would hand deliver it to the next school. Now, I think the majority of schools use kind of vendor hosted platforms such as My Concern or CPOMs to hold their safeguarding records. And then when a child moves on, you do some kind of a digital transfer. But actually, those records have stayed in an archived area or a previous pupil area of your digital platform. And so you've actually started to treat records in an entirely different way to when they were paper. And I don't think you've done that on purpose. So let's talk about deleting and destroying electronic records. As I say, I've talked about paper records in the previous webinar, so I'm not going to go over it again. But let's just remind ourselves of how we deal with electronic records, the retention, deletion or destruction of them. So we've got to make sure that we are still managing and having an audit trail for the destruction of our digital records in the same way that we did for our paper records, because that's a really important requirement of Freedom of Information Act requirements. We've got to make sure that backups and copies of data or extra parts of data should be included in a deletion process. And crucially, I think this is where a lot of schools are now, you're using external providers to host that data in an electronic format for you. It's really important for schools to remember that instead of the filing cabinets in your school, they are virtual filing cabinets on clouds, but you are just as much responsible for them as you were when they were paper records. So you need to really carefully check terms of contracts with external vendors, because you ultimately are still responsible for the records that are held within those platforms. And again, if you're not able to permanently and completely delete electronic data, I did give you some guidance last time on how you should make sure that data is put beyond use. Okay, so that's my little bit of a refresher. Now, I know what you're all here for. You're here for the toolkit. So I'm going to introduce the toolkit. So let's talk about where we are with the toolkit and on what stage we were at. So the toolkit, the Schools and Academy toolkit, were two separate documents, and they were last updated in 2019. And as I say, we had two versions, one for schools and one for academies. And they were big things, weren't they? They were pretty hefty. They had about 100 pages in each. Pages 1 to 60 had guidance on many issues related to records management, data protection, and other things you should consider in your school. We had 40 pages of retention tables. So what's happened since then? Well, actually, the Department for Education has now come out and has produced their own data protection toolkit for schools. We've also got bodies such as the Information Commissioner's Office giving some really helpful advice for schools and small organisations on their data protection obligations. And when we came to review this toolkit, we realised that actually schools had kind of multiple places to search and check, and that actually might feel slightly confusing for schools. The other thing that happened, and we're really grateful to the Department for Education for this, so the Department of Education Data Protection Toolkit includes a link to the IRMS Toolkit for guidance on creating data retention schedules. So it's really good that we have this kind of, interlinking of our two toolkits. So bearing all that in mind, we decided that we needed to make some changes to the toolkit. And when we reviewed it, rather than just review it and check, well, is this all still right, and then reissuing it in its current form, we thought we were going to sort of think outside the box a bit. So what are some of the improvements? And I am going to show you in the toolkit in a bit, but I wanted to tell you about some of the improvements that we've made. Instead of having 100 pages to navigate through, you can now very quickly find the guidance that you need. And the toolkit now reflects for you that most information is held digitally. And I'm going to show you the pupil records section. Some of the advice and guidance we've given you have been updated to reflect the fact that you're probably holding a lot of those pupil records digitally. And so we've got toolkit section with guidance, but we've got less guidance in relation to this because we've taken out some of that data protection advice because the Department for Education do that, the ICO guidance does that, and so we didn't want you to have, you know, potentially confusing or conflicting advice. The most important thing for us in this change now is that we've made the toolkit much more agile to what happens. So we can now update individual sections in response to changes in practice. So you'll remember last time when we talked about ICSA, we talked about retention of child sexual abuse records, and we were hoping and waiting for the ICO, as per the ICSA recommendations, to publish guidance on the long-term retention of CSA records. So what happens is we'll be ready for that, and we will be able to change parts of the toolkit, and you as an IRMS member will receive a notification when that section is updated, and so we won't have to republish the whole toolkit in the same way. So hopefully, with GDPR having been around for quite a while now, schools should really have got a good way through completing some kind of information audit or record of processing activity review completed. And what we think we've got now is the ability for your retention policy to really tie in, and the toolkit to really tie in to your ROPA process. So rather than having them as lots of separate documents you have to go searching around, actually we've been able to bring those that toolkit into your policy where it is relevant to you. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about the platform. So you might want to tie the retention policy to your relevant processing activity. You might also tie then the vendor that you are using to store those records or to do that processing activity. And so you can really vary and change where you need to suit your business practices, because every school is different, and every school makes slightly different choices about the way they're going to manage records. So let me give you an example. And as I say, the idea is with this toolkit that you can kind of pick and choose. It becomes a bit of a pick and mix for your own retention policy. So the IRMS will say that if a child leaves your school in line with keeping children safe in education, so I talk about my platform example here, the IRMS would say you should transfer those safeguarding records to the new school. But what I've found working with schools, because they've got used to being able to keep a digital photocopy, where they used to hand over the whole safeguarding file, now they're like, oh, actually it's quite useful keeping a hold of that copy of that safeguarding for that file for that child. And actually, you know, we have an interest in making sure that we have evidence of the safeguarding work that we've done to protect that child. So maybe you want to make a policy decision where you transfer a copy of the safeguarding record, but you retain a copy as well. So you can amend your retention policy and into that decision of yours. So as I say, it's really up to you. And the toolkit now is designed to support you with your own decision making. And we did notice before, as I say, I've read lots of school retention policies, and they kind of said, oh, you know, our retention policy is the IRMS document. Well, actually, that's not, you know, really a suitable way of going about it. You need to have your own retention policy, and by all means, then bring in the IRMS recommendations. Okay. Yes, so the main thing as well, I think, is, you know, 40 pages of a retention schedule was excessive, and schools told me that they struggle to get their staff to engage with the parts of the retention tables that are relevant to them. So I'll give an example: school fund. So the school fund might be section might be really relevant for schools that have a school fund, and bears no relevancy at all for schools that don't have a school fund. So many academies don't have a school fund. And so actually what you find then is that schools were having lots of information in their retention schedule that really wasn't relevant to them. They didn't do. So let's talk again a little bit more about the improvements and some of a good example. So I've got a really good example. So currently, legislation states that admission and attendance registers have to be retained for 3 years. And I don't know how up to date you are with the news, but in the last few weeks, we've had a new statutory instrument, School Attendance Pupil Registration England Regulations 2024. Apologies to my friends in the principalities if this isn't relevant to you, but this is really important for schools, and it's coming into force from the 19th of August 2024. So what does it say? It says the proprietor of a school must ensure that every entry is now retained for 6 years. So we've got a big change coming up here. And so actually, we're going to be able to update that schedule really quickly. And as an IRMS member, you will get a notification to say the toolkit has been updated at that particular area. And so it's going to be able to make to make it really easier for you to be able to update your policies in accordance with those changes in law. Okay, right, so let's have a look in the toolkit. I know this is what you're here for. I've just made you, just kind of made you wait. Right, okay, so when you come to the toolkit now, instead, when you go to the IRMS Schools Toolkit or the Academies Toolkit, you're going to see this page. And so what you need to do is you need to click into Launch. Now, you do need to be in a logged in state in the IRMS website in order to be able to access this. So you won't be able to access this if you are not a member. There's some information here about how you can join the IRMS I'm going to talk about at the end. So you click on this page and you click to launch the toolkit. Okay, so this is the new toolkit and you will see this looks different. So let's have a look. So at the top of the screen, you'll see these little blobs. They're the same as this. It's just easier for you to navigate because that's kind of pinned to the top. So you can come in and out of the various sections. So we've got our blobs here. We've got our different sort of sections and the things that we think you need advice on as they pertain to records management. And then you will see there's a blob there for the retention schedule itself, which is, the goodies that you really want. But let's have a little look at this. So I am going to show you the email and digital communications thing. Let's have a little look in here. What we've done in this is with that toolkit was 60 pages long and contained lots of information about data protection. We've taken a lot of that out and only retained it where it's really relevant to records management in particular. So this is a good example here because we're talking about subject access requests, which of course do relate to data protection, but they also relate to how you're managing those records to respond to those requests. So here we've got a more up-to-date section on managing your email and digital communications. This guide, these blobs, is not designed to be an exhaustive one-stop shop for everything you need to think about. They're a guide to help you to consider and develop your own processes and procedures in your schools, because each school, as I said before, behaves slightly differently. So yeah, so you can bob about here, dip in and out, and as I say, you can have a look at the various sections here. And as I say, they're shorter, and they're more simple, and hopefully they're more kind of the practical guide. Show you pupil records while I'm at it. I guess some of you might be sort of skim reading this. What am I getting now? Oh yeah, so there we are. Oh, I'm already in there. Right, okay. So those are the toolkit areas where you can have some guidance. The retention schedule itself is what you're all here for, I am sure. So this is the retention schedule, and to say we've introduced it, we've said it's no longer available as a document that can be downloaded in its entirety. And I appreciate that some of you initially might think, well, that's a lesson in, but actually we truly believe that doing it this way is going to be more flexible and more useful for you. Okay, So we've got a note here, retention periods which may fall under the recommendations made by ICSA will be reviewed once the Government and Information Commissioner have published guidance about implementing the recommendations. So say we are still in a state of sort of waiting for that guidance, and so we've reflected that in the schedule. It might be that you as a school have decided to plough on, or it might be that your local authority is advising slightly different. Nobody's wrong and nobody's right on this. This is just, you know, a sort of take on where we are at the moment. So you can see here the purple bits, the bits where I've been clicking away, and so you can jump into all of them. So let's have a look at school admissions, because this was the example I showed you earlier. School admissions is here. So we click in here, and this is where we start the retention schedule. So you can see here that we have got the register of admissions. Is it personal data? Yes. And so we've got the retention period, and then there's some notes. So what's going to happen in the next couple of months is that this is going to be updated, because of course the retention period is going to change because of the new statutory instrument. So that will be changed to 6 years. So far, so good. Hopefully that all makes sense to everybody. And you bob in and out and you can see all of that thing. A lot of it will be familiar. It's not completely rewritten. It's just in a new format. And then, as I say, we've had some experts look at it to check that it's up to date and to check all of the legislation. So every time there's a piece of legislation mentioned, we've gone and checked that that legislation is still correct. Okay, so as I say, what's next is we're going to encourage you to start logging in, having a look. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. I can come back to that at the end if we've got questions, and we can have another look at it together. So as I say, in order to access this toolkit now, you need to be a member of the IRMS, and we hope that you can see that there are a number of benefits to being a member of the IRMS, because you're going to have this kind of proactive advice. The other important thing is to say, as a member of the IRMS, the ownership of this tool is, I'm going to say, semi-democratic. You know, we don't want endless comments on, oh, well, I don't like the way you've written that, or I don't like, you know, I would word it this way. But the point is that the toolkit is owned by the schools group. It's our toolkit, and as school practitioners, you know your schools really well, you know how they work, and so you're going to be able to play a part and have an influence in how we, you know, advise our schools, because you are a member of the IRMS. So as I say, continue to do our webinars. As you know, the webinars have been completely free, open access for anybody for the last year, and so it might be in future we look at just doing webinars just for our schools members, and there'll be more meetings. As I say, Lynn's just started, so you know, it's hers to shape how she wants, and also based on your feedback as well. So what we want you to do is we want you to go to the IRMS. If you are not a member already, go to the main IRMS page and click on Become a Member. And you will see, I mentioned this last time when we met, here is the information for schools about their membership and the fees. If you are already a member, what we really want you to do is to start logging into the platform and start having a look and giving us your feedback. It's on a soft launch at the moment, so as I say, we're launching it today to say, right, you know, it's now available, you can come and have a look at it. We hope you really find the new format more useful, and it, you know, supports your own school processes and documentation in a bit more, you know, a bit more of a kind of integrated way. But as I say, the next couple of months will be, you know, very eager to have your feedback, and then at the IRMS conference, you know, a bit more of the marketing and the hard launch will be taking place to make sure that everybody knows the benefits of the toolkit and how to access it. So as I say, that's all the bit I wanted to talk to you about. So I'd love to have your questions. I don't know if there are any questions. I'll put the toolkit back up.
There are a number of questions in the chat, Claire, which we are dealing with. One of the questions that has just come up as you finished is, how would you suggest schools share the retention schedule with staff to ensure they are compliant? The previous document was easily printed. So do you want me to deal with that, or would you like?
Yes, because you're the main.
Okay. So for those of you who aren't aware, I'm the IRMS Toolkit for Schools general editor, or at least I am at the moment. This is my last review. So basically, what we understand is that schools should be creating their own retention schedules with the information in that is required, and that is what you would share with your staff. So what we have here is the building blocks for you to be able to create your own retention schedules. As Claire said earlier, the IRMS was starting to hit up against some problems with people using the IRMS schedule whole, and that was never the intention. The intention was always that it would be used as a reference tool to create your own retention schedule. So I guess that's what I would say, that either you direct staff to the toolkit if you're if you have a membership, they will be able to access it. But the primary function of the toolkit is to provide all the reference information that you need to create your own documentation.
And as I
So,
say, you should have a record of your processing activities. That is a requirement of the GDPR, and you should have, your information assets and your information asset owners. And so, really, it's about tying that work that you will have done and then incorporating retention periods into that piece of work. So rather than just giving a whole toolkit, which, as I say, when I've spoken to schools and they say, well, I can't give that toolkit to teachers. There's too much of it. It's just not relevant to them. Actually, this is really about saying, well, just, your information asset owners, they should really understand the assets that they're responsible for and how they manage retention in relation to those, rather than just saying, here's the toolkit, or here's the retention schedule, off you go and start shredding stuff. So, as I say, it's designed to bring it to your staff rather than the staff having to access the whole of the schedule. Got any more questions? I can't see any more questions.
No, I can't see any more questions either. I mean, Lynn, are you now in a position to be able to become vocal so that you can take over your role as the chair?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, I can see one other question here in relation to if you navigating it. So if you go to irms.org, log in, and then there's a section. I'm a bit scared of doing this now. If I mess it up, I'll mess it up. If you go to irms.org, I'll show you how to get to the toolkit from the front page. Go to IRMS, and then obviously you make sure you sign in, and then you go to resources, which makes sense, doesn't it? Well, when you logged there, you go RM Toolkit for Schools. Check I'm still logged in. And you get to it that way. Okay. So as I say, go to the front page, go to resources, and then it's there on that drop down there. I can see we've had another question about independent schools. So there isn't a separate toolkit for independent schools. Some things are relevant to independent schools, some things wouldn't be relevant to independent schools, but obviously you can use it as the guide as well. So yeah, but if you are, well done, Elizabeth, you've already answered. And you say, if you would like to volunteer to work on an independent schools module, we'd love to hear from you. That would be fantastic.
There is a question here about would partners be able to license use for all the schools they support? I think that is a conversation we are going to need to have within the IRMS that Lynn and Claire will move forward, because it is a discussion that we have been having, isn't it, Claire, in terms of multi-academy trusts and varying other things. So yeah, I mean, I think that is a conversation that we would need to have, because you would need to have a membership login to be able to access the toolkit. I know Ren is on the call. I'm not entirely sure whether any other members of the exec are actually on the call, but I think if Lynn and Claire can take that as an action back to talk to the exec about how we're going to manage that process.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. We really value your feedback. Hopefully Lynn will be able to pop the email address to contact us with your feedback on this. As I say, we will do absolutely as best we can. We will review all of your suggestions. You know, it's not designed to be perfect. It's not designed to be the one and only font of all knowledge. And so actually, really, you know, what we want is your feedback, but please remember that we're not going to keep rewriting it to suit your particular kind of desire to present something in a particular way. But as I say, I'm really excited about, I mean, I think the example about the school attendance regulations is a perfect timing in many ways, because if we'd have just launched it, by the time we come to review it in 3 years' time, that will be 3 years out of date. And so actually we're going to be able to keep up to date with it this summer. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think that obviously the what we're looking for is any suggestion or comments that you might have, but please not on the format, because it's taken us a long time to get to this point. So yeah, so I'd like to say a huge thank you to Claire for launching the toolkit for us, and indeed for all the work that she did on the toolkit, as well as I put in the chat
Not as much
our
as you,
colleague
Elizabeth.
and our colleague Keith Batchelor, who has done a huge amount of work on the retention for us, for which we are eternally grateful. So I think we do have a recording, and I will need to discuss with Lynn, or Lynn will need to find out how we can make that public. So it just behoves me to say thank you very much for attending. Huge thank you, Claire, for doing that, and enjoy the toolkit. And we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for your support.